I will call the meeting to order at 7:02 p.m. So as a preliminary matter, this is Jillian Prendergast. I am the chair of the Maynard Finance Committee. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Nathan?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Katie?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. And we also have our special guest, our staff, coming tonight. So thanks for that. So Justin, can you hear us okay?
Good evening, everyone.
Thanks so much for coming.
Of course.
All right. I'm going to finish reading the script and then we'll jump into business. Also, as is tradition, my computer is still a potato, so I don't have my camera on, or I will disconnect. So, all right. So, good evening. This is a meeting, open meeting of the Maynard Finance Committee. It is being conducted via Zoom. Speakers on the agenda will be participating remotely, and the chair may allow for the public to provide comment. So depending on the comment, the board may, if able within the confines of open meeting law, respond with the information as opposed to needing to deliberate on the matter. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and our participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public, the meeting/hearing, it's not a hearing, the meeting will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast to individual attendees unless otherwise required by law. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and be able to see your computer screen if you share. So please take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. This meeting is being recorded and will later be posted to the WAVM YouTube channel. So thanks very much for posting that, WAVM. So for all of our meeting materials, all the supporting materials are on Board Docs. You should be able to find that by going to the Town of Maynard website. There is a link on the Finance Committee webpage. And let's see. So now we're going to turn to the agenda. And I don't think all the rest of the comments on the script are for open meeting. So we will go with the abbreviated version tonight. I see that Khadijah has signed on in the meantime. Can you hear us okay tonight? All right, excellent. So we have a full house for the Finance Committee tonight. We have our special guest, Justin. So we are very thankful for everyone's presence tonight. I'd like to kick it off with our first topic tonight, which is updates from Justin and also about some of the annual town meeting sponsored articles. So I hand the floor over to you, sir.
Thank you, Jillian. And my apologies. Jillian did reach out on Friday in regard to draft articles. We're a little behind in town hall, but for the most part, a significant amount of my draft articles should be submitted within the next day or two. Unfortunately, I was pulled in a couple of different directions for our upcoming bonding and some other issues that we had to deal with over the past couple of days. But in essence, a lot of our draft articles for annual town meeting are cyclical in nature. There is no outstanding articles that should draw extreme conversation outside of just our annual budget. So our water enterprise fund, our sewer enterprise fund, our reserve funds for both water and sewer, our receipts transfer from our golf course contract, our perpetual care trust change, which is more of the best way to describe it is a receipt changeover from sale of graves into our trust. The end of our expenditure account is actually 3 accounts when you're talking about the cemeteries. There is one equipment purchase through water through retained earnings. So a retained earnings transfer in regards to a piece of equipment procurement. And other than that, we may be anticipating an easement, but I'm not sure I'll be able to get it developed before annual draft, before annual town meeting. So in essence, it's really those high level budget items that reflect back to DPW or have some ties back to DPW. So if you want to discuss any of those, Jillian, I know it's hard because you guys haven't seen them as a board, but if there's anything weighing on your mind in regards to budget and DPW, please, I'm here tonight to answer any questions you may have. And I am also willing to come back knowing that the articles haven't kind of crossed your plate yet.
Yeah, it's a little hard to talk about the articles since we don't have them in front of us.
Yeah, you don't have to discuss. I mean, if you have more
memo.
questions, I know there's some newer board members who may not understand why DPW may put together those articles versus another department. So it was more of just for context. I know you put out some of those questions in regards to, I want to say you had a question in regards to the golf course receipts. I don't know if you have a specific question regarding the golf course that may be tied back to the golf course receipts, Jillian.
Yeah, so I personally asked that question because I saw that it is an article, but I mean, I think it's always an article. So I'm not sure how many members on the board are aware of sort of the cycle of how that works. Like the golf course pays, it's like sort of reinvested in itself and things like that, but it has to go through certain channels. And I know we've talked about things, we've talked about the senior center, which is also, you know, potentially using some space there right now. And there is some capital things as well for the golf course that have come up in the past. And I think that was all that came up on my brain about the golf course.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Kevin.
Yeah, it's the roof, I believe, is the capital expenditure. It's a roof. Is it a roof replacement or roof? What's going on with the roof, Justin?
Yeah, so I was just going to kind of high level it as a whole, and some of the members may have seen last annual town meeting. So to Jillian's point, we have a contract for our management operation of the town of Maynard's golf course. So the golf course within the town of Maynard is a public asset. We own the facility, and we have a contract for a management service called Sterling Golf, who utilizes our asset to run their own business, and they pay us a revenue share. They have a minimum payment of $50,000 a year, and then there's a cost sharing based on revenues above that aspect. So typically we average anywhere between $60,000 to $75,000 a year in revenue back to the town. Based on the contract that we have with Sterling Management, the town of Maynard is still responsible for capital improvements there above and beyond $6,000. So if there is, let's just say, a window gets broken with the golf ball, it's Sterling Golf Management's responsibility to replace that window. But let's just say that the ramp going up to the facility were to collapse, that's the town of Maynard's responsibility. And obviously there's a far more minutia outside of that. It even goes into the golf course operations, such as the wells, the pumps, running irrigation as a whole. With that being said, we have a large capital issue with that facility. So when the town of Maynard purchased that facility, the facility was already past its useful life. It's a building that has multiple additions on it that was kind of just piecemealed together. So we have a major roof failure in regards to that facility, and it actually also incorporates roof-mounted HVAC components that are past their useful life. The roof failure is starting to deteriorate the interior of the facility. If you've ever visited the Maynard Golf Course and you go inside, whether you go into the COA or the front door, you'll see ceiling tiles that are destroyed. You'll see some plaster issues over by the bar. That's all degradation from the roof. It's a flat roof with EPDM and asphalt shingles. Again, it's really it's a mishmash of issues there, but all of them are past their useful life, and the entire roof has to be replaced, not only from a roofing material replacement, but from a structural issue. There's also lead and asbestos abatement that comes with that. So as of right now, our estimated cost for full replacement and HVAC component replacement is $770,000. I emailed with Jillian recently to find out that you have been given access to our ClearGov system to see our capital improvement requests. So if you want some major details, it's actually housed in there as an attachment. You'll see the scope of work proposed for the roof replacement. I will say that that's not the only large scale capital improvement item there. It's just the most risky. The windows and envelope are failing. The egresses are subpar, to say the least. There was some investment made in that facility, but strictly on the COA portion, roughly less than 10 years ago. But the facility as a whole is in major need of multi-million-dollar upgrades. But the roof is our highest priority, and we're starting to compartmentalize that out in requests because we may have to entertain bonding to solve that issue. Over the course of the past 4 years since I've been here, we've done annual receipt transfers in that $50,000 to $65,000 range, and we are building our reserves to try to offset the costs so that we don't have to go out to bond. But unfortunately, as fast as we're building revenue, inflation's doing a number on us. So the delta gap is closing, just not as fast as you would like. Technically, right now we have about $250,000 in our accounts. So we have a $500,000 or $500,000 deficit to overcome to even move on the roof this year. And again, both of those continue to grow, and we're just not closing the gap. So there's a bigger, larger conversation there.
All right.
That's kind of the high level of the golf course.
All right. So I guess first question to Justin: are you familiar with the financials of this contract arrangement? Like, what revenue are we getting? Because what I would like to do on this article is ascertain what the financials look like. Is this going to be a net ROI for our town, or are we in fact going to be spending money for some non-financial benefit for our residents? I
can give you the information, Kevin, but technically, just so you're aware, there's a $50,000 minimum, and we average 65,000. That's all we bring in. So there is a negative aspect to this from a revenue or financial aspect. So technically, the town of Maynard is, in essence, paying for a service to provide for its residents. We're not. This is not a net cash benefit. That $250,000, whether we bond out and we use it to offset bond costs, no, the town of Maynard puts in money. Or let's rephrase that: we don't put in money, but our assets crumbling. So you have to look at it in that retrospect. So technically, we don't pay for anything outside within my facility's general operating budget, but we do utilize some of that revenue to offset smaller capital improvement aspects that I deem are high risk to the operation. So we have kind of held back on some of the improvements in that facility of a minor statute so that we can continue to address the roof. Without the facility, it brings in no revenue, and then we're just upside down.
Okay. What was the last valuation of the building done?
You want to so you would have to ask the assessor of that.
Okay.
We don't run that annually because it's not taxed.
Okay, it's not taxed.
Sure, if you ask as the finance committee, I'm sure the assessor can give you a rough idea.
Yeah, I do think we need to establish, again, I'm interested in the financials to present to town meeting voters. Is this a negative cash flow? Is this we're paying money for a non-financial service, or is there some residual value left in the building that we could potentially save by doing this improvement?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of nuances. I'm pretty positive there's a conservation restriction on that entire parcel, which will change the value. So if you were to necessarily disposition that, there's a hard conservation restriction on that whole property. So again, you'd have to dive in a little deeper, but you could definitely start with the assessor giving you a rough valuation of the facility.
Yeah. So Katie, if we
And
could
I
send
think it's
a,
important to note that that article is more, I don't want to say housekeeping, but it's more routine. It's sort of more like saying this is what the article is not about the roof right now.
okay, they are okay. Oh, just to be clear, okay, so this is the routine $60,000 that we receive in revenue.
That's it.
Okay,
Yep.
Yeah.
okay,
There's
so
no
that
bonding request, Kevin. There's
All right.
no borrowing capacity. If that was in consideration, we'd have a much larger conversation.
all right.
Yeah,
That
no,
per-
when I bring up the bonding, the only reason I say that is we're not closing the gap of the cost of the repairs with the revenue source.
Okay.
So unfortunately, the town will have to figure out a means to close that gap outside of just strictly the golf course revenue.
All right. So we receive, so I know this is routine, but just so I can explain it to town meeting voters, we receive about $60,000 in gross revenue from this operations. And then we turn around and we're spending more than $60,000 in maintenance on this.
We would be in essence, yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I agree. I think this is going to be a more detailed conversation later, but I'm willing to forego that conversation. Well, I imagine you probably intend to bring this around a special town meeting, correct?
No. So I don't even know where the bonding will be. So this is
Okay.
in the hands of the capital committee. So just be aware the Capcom is fully understanding of the issues that we have, the funding mechanisms and the funding gaps, and it is their job to make a recommendation to the town administrator and the select board and how they want to approach it. I just put in the scope of services, the rough costs, and I prioritize the capital improvements at each facility. And I'm only prioritizing at this time the roof, but it may be a situation where if we have to bond, you then have the conversation of, well, if we're going to bond for $500,000, do we bond and do all of the work and look at the difference in cost value? That's more of the reason that I brought that up. Sometimes you don't want to chase $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 bonds because the cost just to go out to bond is significant. So that's a different conversation, but that's being discussed, I'm sure, with Capcom, the TA, and the select board. But again, if the finance committee wants to be part of that conversation, I highly encourage you to reach out to the TA.
Okay. Do you know what?
Wait, Kevin, sorry. Can I just restate 1 second, Justin, on the cash flow with the golf course? Per the contract, the revenue sharing, we get 50 to 60K each year that we then turn around and spend on the golf course. We're not spending any money outside of that. And with that level of spending, you'd certainly say the asset that we have there is slowly deteriorating.
100%, Peter, you nailed it. That's 100% correct. Yep.
Justin, if the
Sorry,
Council
Kevin,
on
thanks.
Aging moves out, oh, sorry, Peter.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
If the Council on Aging moves out to their new senior center, is there any savings to the town and utilities? With the golf course, would we get more revenue from the golf course because they could use more of the space?
So Linda,
So
that is conceptual. So that
Yeah.
did actually take place when we first procured the golf course. The COA wasn't there, and at that time, Sterling Golf has been the management company since we procured it. We've actually gone out to RFP twice, and they're the only contender in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It just happens. But they actually do describe when they first received their first contract that they saw increased revenue because they had excess space, which was the COA at the time, that they used for wedding functions and things of that nature. Now, if you look at the layout, if you haven't been in there, Linda, we've built it out to be a COA. It's not just an excess room.
Yeah.
There would be some modifications that would have to be done in order for the golf course to use it in a manner that would be, cumbersome to them or advantageous to them. But in regards to saving on utilities, it depends on what the COA does, Linda. So technically the COA pays for the cost sharing of the utilities. So right now it's a square footage cost differential. Technically, the best way to describe it is the town of Maynard pays about 25% of the electric and gas costs to operate that facility. Sterling Golf pays the other 75%. That includes water and sewer. We don't charge the COA, but we do keep that bill on track so that technically Sterling Golf pays 75%. Now, also be aware that their irrigation system, so the golf course, is not tied to public drinking water. So they have their own wells, they have their own pond, they have their own pumping equipment, which is costly. But it also saves on our capacity. So that's also like a bigger conversation. It's something that we want to continue to take place, but it is a cost driver for them. I wouldn't say there would be a substantial difference, Linda, because based off the conversations that I hear and what the COA may or may not do, if they were to lease other space, like the Mill and Main, I'm sure Amy's budget would drastically go up. So
Yeah.
as of right now, the way that I see it and the financials that I saw with the lease agreement with Mill and Main is right now having the COA in that facility is actually a cost reduction for the town.
Yeah.
It's just there's other issues. The COA can explain those more, but
Yeah.
I can hit on some of those points. The envelope's failing, so the egresses are not easy. If you've never traversed that location, especially from an elderly person, the parking lot topography is awful. So it's just not an ideal facility. It wasn't designed for seniors per se.
Thank you.
This may be getting a little far afield, but Justin, can you speak to what happened when the town acquired the golf course in the first place? Was it primarily to like provide a service to residents, or was there thoughts that would be profit making?
So they purchased it with CPA funds. If you're unfamiliar with CPA funds, there is a historic bucket, a recreational bucket, which they targeted the recreational bucket. So when the golf course went under, it was bankrupt and it was for sale. The town as a whole, this is a town meeting vote, not just local government, not just the select board. It's a town meeting vote to procure that situation. I'm sure it was brought forth by major stakeholders such as the TA, select board at the time, but they utilized CPA funds. They actually bonded for the purchase of that. But technically right now, the CPA is still paying for those bond proceeds on that golf course. It is sunsetting soon. So the CPA can decide to do whatever they want with their funds after that. But I know that has actually been a hindrance on a lot of recreational improvements throughout the town over the course of that bonding process. So when you hear CPA say we can't fund the entirety of the bleachers, because a lot of their recreational funding or the discretionary funding is going towards their bond payments for the golf course. Now, I wasn't here when the town meeting happened, but everything that I hear culturally was that there was a little bit of contention. It wasn't an easy town meeting. There was a little bit of back and forth. It wasn't a unanimous, hey, everybody wants a golf course, but it was sold on the sheer fact that there was a need for conservation land and need for excess recreation. Now, the golf course, whether it's run by Sterling or not, technically is a recreation conservation parcel under the name Town of Maynard. So it is our asset for conservation and recreation.
Just to add to that for people who may not know, I mean, when that happened, I think the primary driver of town meeting was concern about the parcel being developed for housing. And we were seeking to, to buy it with the CPAC money. The idea of continuing it as a golf course has always been a short-term thing. That, when we bought it, we said, okay, let's not let the golf course deteriorate, and then we can never have it be a golf course again. So we decided we'd keep running it as a golf course until we decide to do something else with it. But at the time it was happening, we were concerned about having that much development in town and the impact on schools. Little did we know we'd be wanting students 20 years later. But anyway, that was mostly the context of it, was to avoid it being sold for development.
Yeah, it's considered
At least
open
from my
space and
point of view.
recreation. It's in the open space and rec plan for the town. It definitely meets a lot of master plan goals, things of that nature. It's just to Peter's point, you know, what's the next move? I will tell you from my position, I haven't been told otherwise. Keep running the golf course.
A sensitivity on the part of the CPC, which is the Community Preservation Committee, regarding the golf course, in that the structure itself may not have been eligible for CPC funding. And that's one of the overhanging issues that the CPC is wrestling with. And they have approached the FinCom. They've discussed with FinCom before about the town possibly throwing some money to purchase the structure. But there is a sensitivity there that by certain readings of the Community Preservation Act, that clubhouse should not have been eligible for the CPC, but it has not undergone a thorough legal review.
So I won't speak too highly of this, but town council reviewed that prior to the CPA purchasing, and the AG's office approved of it. So just be mindful of that.
Okay, that's a little bit of history that I have not heard, but yeah, but that's it's good to know that this was actually reviewed and approved by AG, state AG.
Yeah, all our articles always have to be approved by the AG. So even if an article came across town meeting, it still has to be approved by the AG's office. I think a lot of that is more of a buyer's remorse. And I will say there is some buyer's remorse. There's a situation of we thought we were getting X and we didn't do a thorough facilities assessment, and we're taking on a large amount of deterioration. So, I mean, I know Kadisha is an architect. I'll bring you in the facility sometime, Kadisha, and you'll shake your head and say it should be demoed. And there's no basement. It's just it was a cottagey situation that turned into a clubhouse. It's just a bad asset that we need to invest heavily in. I will say that other towns have done this. St. Mark's in Southborough is a perfect example of it. They purchased a very, very small golf course for the town of Southborough, but they invested $1.5 million in it. Their revenues have now tripled. So it's like anything else. If you look at it like a business, you have to invest sometimes, and the draw is there. The competition for public golf courses is dwindling, meaning there is a supply and demand. There is no 9-hole public golf courses similar to Maynard. If there was a large investment, we could draw a bigger crowd, which could draw bigger revenue. It's just hard to get across because we have other improvements that are far more vital within the community than driving a business. That's the hard part about this. But like anything else, there is definitely capital to be had there and revenue to be had if it was flipped around. I'm an actual avid golfer, and I will tell you, there is a 9-hole course in Bolton called Twin Springs that just went under development, and it was Sterling Golf and Town of Maynard's direct competition, and we saw probably about a 30% increase in our season passes directly tied to Twin Springs. And this is, if you ever went to both golf course, Twin Springs is like really high level, and there's not a lot of other options for 9-hole courses. So the potential is there. It's unfortunate that within the industry, there's not a lot of management competition. So there's really only one pony in the game, and it's Sterling Golf Management. They manage roughly a half a dozen public golf courses. There's just not a lot of competition there to drive up the revenue, but it's a conversation to be had. It's a long-term conversation to be had as well.
So last question, who is under the contract with Sterling Golf? Who is responsible for the day-to-day maintenance of the facility? Is that Sterling Golf?
That is Sterling Golf. That is correct. Yeah. So like every large service contract, I'm the contract manager of that aspect, but it's very similar to our wastewater treatment facility. So they are responsible for the entire asset, day-to-day maintenance up to $6,000 an incident for repairs. So not like a collective. It's not like, hey, we got all these things and that's over $6,000. It's actually an incident. And then we're responsible for any major improvements above that threshold. I'm not impressed with Sterling. I'm also realistic that it is what it is. Do they go above and beyond? No. Do they make sure the course is suitable for them to maximize revenue? Absolutely. The facility is just there. That is not the driver of their revenue. The golf course is the driver of their revenue. Most people aren't sitting there drinking for 5 hours after they play. So they see the difference and they invest in the golf course and less in the facility.
But they are responsible and in a sense. So let me ask you, you've probably done walkthroughs of this facility. Is the root cause of this the failure of the roof membrane because of a lack of regular maintenance?
It's 45 years old.
Okay.
And it was put together with lead overhangs over asphalt shingles. It was never put on properly. It is a huge issue.
Okay. So it's back to the buyer's remorse. We kind of bought an asset with a
Yeah, it's actually a direct correlation to a roof mounted HVAC system that they put on when it turned into a golf course, and they didn't actually do it properly. So the transitions weren't done. So most of the failures are due to the HVAC component connection. So
who's the they there? Is that Sterling or was that the prior owner of the golf course?
Prior owner. Yeah,
okay.
Prior owner. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a reason they went bankrupt.
Yeah, and we bought the asset off of them, and they kind of we're regretting that purchase now.
I wouldn't say regret, it's just lack of investment. So again, the asset can make money, but it's prioritization. So you could say the same thing with the art space building. So we had a contract where someone was responsible to maintain it. They met the bare bone minimum, maximized what they could off of it, and now we're sitting with an asset that's worth nothing. So someone could say the same thing on the opposite end if we disposition that.
Okay.
Justin, I had a question. Oh, sorry.
I'm done with the golf course. I just want to say that.
I had questions on two other things. We got two other articles. One is from the tree committee. They want to put an article on shade trees, a new part of the bylaws, and it references a lot of work for the tree warden. So do we already have, is that you or someone designated in your office is already the tree warden?
So I am the tree warden as well, Linda.
Okay.
So the tree committee is a TA appointed committee, and actually the tree committee was originally formed when I started 4 years ago. And their sole role was to assist the tree warden. As you can imagine, with too many hats, I don't have enough time to do a lot of things. Yeah. So the tree committee has grown exponentially in the 4 years, meaning their educational aspect, their knowledge towards process, and they have singularly come to a collective understanding of approach. The bylaw that they have put in place is actually one that I wanted in place, and I worked diligently with the committee over the last 4 years to make sure that it wasn't overreaching. It was not something that could change authority outside Mass General Law. If you're unfamiliar with public shade tree laws, it's Chapter 87 under Mass General Law, which allows the tree warden certain legalities under state code. So we can't necessarily supersede that. We could always make it stricter. But to that point, when you're introducing a bylaw for the first time, it was highly encouraged that we're looking at this as mostly an educational piece, because most people don't really want to dig through Mass General Law. You know, I know how to navigate it because I've been doing it for a long time. And every once in a while, I just shake my head and say, oh my God, does this circle back? This is a lawyer's heaven. But in essence, it's really just like a general overview, and it's something that could be built off in the future, Linda. But technically, I'm already doing all of that work, and I'm already responsible for that.
Thank you.
A lot of this was to empower the tree committee. It was also to empower our community. So we are focused on enhancement of public shade trees and what that valuation can do for the overall community. So.
Justin, when I was reading through that Warren article, I was comparing it to the Mass General Law, and like a lot of the language seemed, well, just like you said, it's, kind of using that. And I was hoping you could clarify, like, what is additional? Is it mostly the part about establishing the tree committee? Or are there parts about what the tree warden does in addition to what's already in Mass General Law?
So Nathan, a lot of it was more of a localized education. I find that most of the residents that I've dealt with in my 20 years experience don't go into state law statute. Stakeholders do in committees when they start to dig in, as you heard Kevin say, he wants to dig further. That not a lot of stakeholders get to that level. That's a committee situation. But from a day-to-day residential aspect, most people will go as far as finding their local bylaws. So a lot of this was just a carryover so that our residents can be more educated or the information is in front of them. Also, town meeting is a beautiful thing in some aspects. It is very, very slow in governmental process, but it is a great opportunity to educate the masses in one day. So understanding if there's questions, what these are, I'll be there and I'm able to answer those, which also empower our residents to really understand what's going on. And to your last point, Nathan, a lot of that is to empower the tree committee. And over time, if you're unfamiliar, bylaws can be very contentious. So residents, when they see bylaws, they look at that as rights being lost or change of rights. And when you're introducing a new bylaw, which this is, you want to touch very softly on what that looks like. So am I impacting a lot of people's rights with this? Absolutely not. It's all state statute. You can, if you ever reference Cambridge's tree law, it actually crosses private property rights. And that bylaw was not implemented overnight. It was years and years and years of development. I am very sensitive to public-private property rights. And a lot of this is more of an education and understanding when we're growing as a community, the importance and the role of public shade trees in our growth pattern. So if we start to become a very dense community, we are already a dense community, but the best way to describe it is we're a very, very dense town, but there's larger conversations here. I think I want to say all of you were at the tri-board meeting when I said, are you prepared for what a city looks like? Right now, we're out of space horizontally. The next step is vertically. So Jimmy McDonald's in 115 is your first opportunity to start to see vertically in your time in this town. And as you start to loosen bylaws and you chase growth, it's going to get higher and higher and higher and denser and denser and denser. And there's a huge role to play here with not losing the sheer fact of open space, conservation, recreation, public shade trees, environmental protection. And sadly, all of those things have to do with climate change. So it's a lot of this is setting the table for our future conversations on how we adapt to climate change as a community.
My other question was on the spreadsheet. We got a great spreadsheet from you on the solid waste and recycling.
Mhm.
And my question is, and you had a lot on the revenue that we get. What's the process for increasing the sticker fees? If we have any of that, if we
So
have
Linda,
that.
how long have you lived in town?
A long time, and I've paid the same for a long time.
Okay, do you
40
remember?
years.
Do you remember about 3 or 4 years ago there was a sticker that said "I survived Maynard Trashgate"?
Yeah.
So that was made because of me. So when I first started 4 years ago, the stickers were not increased for over 20 years.
Yeah.
And this gap was two to three times the size of that in regards to the expenditure gap. I made a recommendation to the select board. We adopted a change in sticker pricing, which was a 50% increase. Actually, I'm sorry, it was a 100% increase.
Yeah.
So it went from $1 to $2, $2 to $4, which then thus closed the gap to what you see today.
Yeah.
That was not taken lightly. Technically, about 2 years ago, I looked at it again and revisited it and brought another second recommendation to the select board, not only from a revenue perspective, but from a programmatic change and a programmatic approach to a more efficient and effective system. The select board entertained it, but was also very, very sensitive to the sheer fact of residents and their services. And there was some blowback and pushback with, I pay enough taxes, you should just pick my trash up. So the task force that you may hear about, our solid waste and recycling task force, was formed to explore all opportunities. I am on that board. I'm on that task force with a number of volunteer residents who have technical skills in multiple aspects of solid waste management. And we're on the verge of developing our finalized recommended programmatic approach for the select board to consider for adoption. And one of the sheer facts is that I have not let go of the financial gap and why I presented this in the first place. And some of our recommendations would be for a complete 100% offset, Linda. But again, that recommendation hasn't been made. I'm hoping that that can happen within the next couple of months. We are working pretty hard and we're very close. And if anything, we would look to have a program that's 100% self-funded.
And so this is really in the authority of the select board, sounds like.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
So, but here's the thing, Linda, this is a multi-authority issue. So the Board of Health, the Board of Health adopts the program rules and regulations. So our recommendation has to be adopted by the Board of Health. Then the contract management and financials have to be adopted by the select board.
Thank you.
My recommendation that I believe Kevin may have sent you guys the PowerPoint presentations. I can't remember. It was probably about 2 years ago now. The Board of Health actually adopted my recommendation for programmatic change. It was the select board that was very hesitant to that. Again, they are sensitive to the sheer fact of no matter how you look at it, it does hit our residents' pocketbook or your wallet. So even if we increase the stickers, that's increasing while taxes increase, while water and sewer rates increase. So there was a sensitivity to that, specifically at the time when we were talking about the Green Meadow School.
So first, let me just inform the committee. This is that recommendation that Justin just talked about is what I've been a broken record about for the last 8 months or so, maybe even longer. But as he says, there is a full financial offset to be had. And Justin, I'm taking that you mean the $494,000 you referred to in the spreadsheet?
Yeah, so that's our tax subsidy. So technically right now we collect, you can see the total sticker sales, which is our receipts, and the 431,865 is what we pay for out of general taxation. So if we were to close that gap, that 431,865 could be reallocated for many things within your operating budget, or it could offset tax rate increases. So there's multiple ways to look at that. There's also, many theories where, okay, if you reallocate that, then we're still paying for X, Y, Z. So the only way to potentially reduce cost burden to our residents would be to offset the tax rate with it. But while we're in budget crisis for a number of things, you have the schools that are asking for X and they may not get X. And you have other services that are requiring investment or increasing operating budgets. This could potentially be used to offset that. But again, my job is really to identify this and come up with ideas and solutions to allow for the town to free up some of its general tax funding.
Now, Justin, I saw in that presentation that you gave about 2 years ago that were you to adopt the programmatic changes that you would recommend, were the select board to adopt the programmatic changes you recommended, the effective, not just the tax subsidy, but the cost that the residents pay themselves in lieu of a sticker fee. I think it was like a monthly barrel fee. But the rate they were paying would actually go down by virtue of the automated barrels and the labor cost savings we would achieve and the efficiencies we achieve by the automated barrel system.
Yeah, at that time we had cost quotes for 2 options. And the shift in the allowance to go to an automated service reduced cost burden for drivers, staff on behalf of the service contract, liabilities for workman's comp, things of that nature, because it's a machine operated lifting capacity versus a man operated lifting capacity. So at that time, though, remember that's a snapshot in time. As we go through as a task force and we define our programmatic approach, and that becomes adopted, we will submit either an RFP or an IFP, and we will secure the real cost of that programmatic approach. And then we can weigh that against the revenue that's needed to offset it. But that's what we're working through. So step one is to identify the program approach that the town of Maynard could see as an effective, efficient means that also satisfies all the wants of our residents per se. We're never going to satisfy everybody. So just please be aware, when you're talking about a service that affects every single resident, we're never going to satisfy the masses. But if you can remember, we put out a very diligent survey. It was very thorough, and we have a significant amount of information. It was one of our most, actually, it was our most successful survey to date in general government. So we feel very confident in where we're headed. Now we're just trying to make sure that we, our programmatic approach is something that is not overly innovative in the industry, because then you have cost triggers for trying to invent a new program. But we're just making sure we check the due diligence of several comp towns that have programs very similar to where we're tracking.
So is there a plan of is there a feel for the timeline on this, in terms of, when you give your recommendation, then the select board gets approval, like how soon could we potentially see that the savings from the subsidies we're currently giving to the trash program, should that be adopted?
So technically right now, our current service contract expires June 30th, 2024. But we have another 1-year extension on that contract that will bring us to June 30th, 2025. Based on the way that the committee is moving, we anticipate that we should have a recommendation to the board within the next couple of months. But that being said, with that recommendation, we're also looking for the potential of the financial structure, which may take a town meeting. So there could be a request for enterprise funding for a special town meeting. There, we're also tracking that we want to do an RFP. If you are unaware, that solid waste and recycling is exempt under Massachusetts procurement law, meaning that any town could just hire whoever they want. Basically, we do want to open it back up for competition. So an RFP takes time, though. So development of the RFP, going over that process. So if anything, I would anticipate that anything that's going to happen wouldn't affect the financials until FY26.
Okay. Let me just say, like, putting on my financial oversight hat for a second, it would be my strong preference that be a competitive process, as opposed to, sole sourcing or whatever the official terminology is.
Well, that's where we're leaning. The problem is when you identify too prescriptive a program, then you created sole source to begin with. And that's the issue. If you're unaware of the reason why it's procurement exempt, there's about 3 to 4 major players in the Commonwealth. It's an oligopoly, and that's not changing. Technically, environmental policy is creating a monopoly. So a lot of the oligopolies are starting to buy each other out because there's nowhere to bring solid waste, and state policy is actually driving that. You can make the argument of why, if it's right or wrong, but technically when you're talking about capitalism, the policy is driving the cost and they're driving those factors. For the town of Maynard, we're trying to capture everything within our community's needs, but a cost-effective approach. So I will say, perfect example in the survey is everybody wants a transfer facility. Everybody wants weekly this, weekly that, but they don't want to pay more. So again, not everybody's going to get what they want, but at the end of the day, we're trying to capture at least the service that enhances what we have, but effectively and efficiently modernizes the program with a financial cost offset across the board.
So you mentioned the transfer facility, for example. There's other constraints we have to operate under other than just financial and the services a residents wants. There's also environmental considerations, which severely constrains our ability to provide a transfer facility, just as an example. But just so the rest of the committee is aware that this is a very complex operation with a lot of moving parts to it.
We are tracking well, though. I will say the conversation will start to really ramp up, hopefully prior to special town meeting. So there may be the conversation of the financial triggers and town meeting vote at that time. We should have a better understanding if the board adopts our programmatic approach. We'll probably see pushback or not. We'll have a better gauge of how the town's feeling by that programmatic approach prior to special town meeting. So I would kind of keep that in your mind for this conversation.
And I guess my last thought on the matter is are the recommendations you considering going to involve a upfront capital investment that would save, upfront capital investment that would save operational costs? But
so
would require.
I would love to say that Maynard is in a financially secure position to do that, but we're not. And the luxury of me wearing multiple hats is I'm at every single meeting of every stakeholder and every major authority. And I am well aware of the financial issues looming over the town of Maynard as a whole. So we're approaching this service contract with the situation where any capital improvement is baked into the contract. And then we will design the contract specifically if we have design modifications of the program. We'll design the contract so it's not long-term so that we can reassess after typically like a 3-year contract. And at that time, we may consider, depending on our financial situation, we may consider investing in our own systems. And what Kevin's talking about is if we went to a cart system, would we purchase the carts and own them, or would we have that baked into a service contract? There's many ways to look at that. You could even have that conversation of a transfer facility if we went in that direction, which we're not leaning because the costs are far too much. Would you invest in a $15 million facility? But am I going to be the only one saying, hey, we want a transfer station against the school that's $70 million, a DPW that's going to be about $15 million, a senior center that may be $10 million? The timing is not appropriate.
Justin, did I understand correctly that a new contract would take effect in FY26, and that would be for the hauling portion of the solid waste budget?
So our last contract extension will actually take place in FY25. So this July 1st.
Yeah. So one more year, and then we don't know what's happening in FY26.
Yeah. So let's just say, so we're not going to have a recommendation. I will spill the beans. So in a month or two, I'm going to approach the select board to issue the last extension as part of our current contract. Within that July to July, we will hopefully conduct a special town meeting that should remove any hurdles we need from a town meeting vote. And then after that, we will issue RFP over the winter, hopefully award contract in the spring in anticipation for July 1st. When you're talking about large service contracts like this, you actually need a significant amount of time, specifically if we need a town meeting vote. Because if we don't get it at special, we're going to have to get it at annual. Or we're going to have to just go back to, hey, non-sole source, hey, non-procurement, can you give us a contract for the next 3 years to continue at this pace? And we can always have those conversations. So, but that would be like the emergency approach. This is the right way to plan it so that if there was any issues at special or conversation pieces that needed to be had, we can address those at special. And if it had to, it can carry over to annual, but we can still conduct the RFP in the wintertime.
But our solid waste and recycling expenses would not be affected by the new budget because that's based on the landfills that are accepting those. Is that correct?
Correct. So we technically have 2 contracts. So our solid, and maybe I should have premised with this because I know Kevin has gone to a lot of meetings, but some of you have not. So technically we have 2 contracts that represent our solid waste and recycling. So E.L. Harvey, who you are aware of if you participate, they pick up and collect solid waste. They also pick up and collect recycling. With solid waste, they bring that to a separate facility that we have a contract with called Wheelabrator. It's an incinerator. We're under contract with them until 2027. It's actually a collective community contract. There's about 20 communities in a contract that's been in place for over 10 years. That is what we refer to as a tipping or tonnage contract. So that is controlled. So that's the one factor that we can predict at least to 2027. And that's a contract that's actually at this point in time very, very, very advantageous to us. So when that contract expires, we're in panic mode. But E.L. Harvey is the programmatic approach. So they take our recycling commodities and they bring those to their facility. And we have cost sharing revenue offsets. So about 10 plus years ago, when single stream recycling started to become popular across the Commonwealth, well, really across a lot of states, recycling commodities actually had a value and we would receive funding back to offset the cost. That's no longer the case. China's not buying our commodity. It's a global, you're talking about a global commodity market. So now E.L. Harvey picks up our recycling and they charge us a tipping fee or a tonnage fee for our recycling based off a monthly commodity market. So 1 month glass may actually bring into the black. We may make money while plastics are the opposite. And then the next month, maybe somebody's buying plastics and they're not buying gas. But in average, that's about $90 a ton. On our solid waste, we're actually, you'll never hear everybody will get mad with what I'm about to say, but it'd actually be cheaper for the town to take all the recycling and throw it in the trash. Because our tipping fee for our solid waste is $73 a ton. So it costs us more to get rid of recycling right now than it does tonnage. But that's only because we're sitting on this long grandfathered contract that will most likely double when that time comes. So our hauling and service contract, we're trying to line up to sunset at the same time as our tonnage contract. So at that point, we could have options to either split contracts like we currently have, or to have one centralized contract that may be more competitive. If someone is also able to secure the tonnage, that may be a conversation. But what most large municipalities are dealing with is actually the tonnage fees that they're no longer on a long tonnage contract with. And that's what's driving up the costs, because facilities like Wheelabrator are being policied and shrunk and squished out. Landfills are capped, closed, and we are railing out solid waste to other states. And those states will close their caps and they'll stop their facilities, and we'll go further and further and further away. So there is an issue in regards to that. So the task force is made up of significant technical experts, and we are also looking at our program to reduce our solid waste. So education, offsets, organics, removal outside of our tonnage so that we can reduce the overall efficiency and effectiveness, which has a financial it's been a night. Financial aspect to our contract and reducing it over time. So yes, we're exploring multiple options, and that's why it's taken so long. We're not thinking about the now, we're also thinking about the future. I hope that answered that in a nutshell.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, thank you. We're working on future planning, so I'm kind of wondering when we might see like bumps and spikes in different parts of the budget.
Yeah, I would say FY26, FY27 when it comes to solid waste and recycling. So if anything, no matter what, when we change those two contracts, typically when you have a contract change, you have a spike at the end and sunset of a contract to a new contract. That's when those vendors try to recapture lost revenue from a contract that may have been advantageous to the previous service contract. And everybody does it. They do it across the board. Whether we go away from E.L. Harvey and say Republic comes in, they know what the previous contracts are. That's the beauty of the Freedom of Information Act. Everybody knows what everybody pays. So there is a conversation to be had that they know roughly where EL Harvey is, and they're going to try to make their revenue if that's the conversation piece. So we will see a spike no matter what. We saw a spike 2 years ago when we changed and nothing's changed, but our contract sunsetted and we went right back to EL Harvey. There was a spike in the costs.
Do you know about how much that spike was?
I want to say it was
what we might expect?
$150,000 to $200,000.
So like maybe about a quarter of the budget.
Well, it's about $1 million budget, roughly.
Oh, okay, for the whole. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So I think for financial modeling, Nathan, I think a percentage is probably going to be more accurate, because things tend to scale multiplicative instead of on an absolute basis. So
I have a question about, so we're a part of the Black Earth Compost community here in Maynard, and I know the more people that are part of that, the lower the fee is for residents, and they've been working on that. Are there studies done that show the more people that sign up for that particular program, the less usage in like trash, and does that have any, correlation?
Oh, absolutely, Katie. So there's a direct correlation. So if you're unaware, DEP's policies are looking to ban certain substances from going into the waste stream. Mattresses and textiles were the recent. If you can remember that we launched the textile recycle bins and that we have a mattress recycle program or a curbside collection, but we can no longer take bulky items. That was banned from the waste stream. That was, again, take a bulky item. That's your highest level. Let's get that thing right out of there. That's hundreds of thousands of pounds a day. Organics is actually what DEP is targeting next. They do audits of the of Wheelabrator and the local dumps to see what residents of Massachusetts are throwing out. And within their master plans, and I'm talking about the state's master plans, they look at incrementally removing aspects to reduce overall solid waste. Organics is a target. The issue is, Katie, Black Earth Compost is the only pony doing it. So again, it's this.
They're great though. They come every week and they're very reliable. They're
They
good.
are great. So I actually approached them 2 or 3 years ago to see if they wanted to contract with the town of Maynard to provide the service, but they don't. They actually prefer to just be a preferred vendor. A lot of it is the upfront capital they have to put when you have a large service contract for a community, and they're the only game in town. So they prefer that their business model is what they approach, and that's fine. I do know that they just built a brand new composting facility. I want to say it was in Boxborough, because they're having issues now because they have so many customers. They're now having issues with site. So it does take time to compost all that. It's not just, hey, throw it in a pile and next year you get Black Earth. And that's heavily regulated by DEP as well. So if you're unfamiliar with organic breakdown, it's a lot of phosphorus, a lot of nitrogen, which inhibits or restricts waterways. So even though we think we're doing a good thing, when you concentrate something, you create a bad situation for the environment. So we are exploring that, but I will tell you this. There's not many, if any, municipalities that provide strictly organic curbside collection as part of their program. If anything, they're doing what we're doing, which is we promote Black Earth, we endorse it. Our sustainability committee works diligently to educate our citizens. We have volunteer committees such as Green Maynard, if you're unfamiliar with Green Maynard, that really pumps that out there as well. So that's kind of the avenue we're taking, just education. It helps offset the cost as a whole. And I think that will hopefully get pumped out there a little more when we make our programmatic approach.
That's great. Thank you.
I would love to say that if we had a facility to house a composting location, that's something that would be great, but we don't. We're literally the river cuts through Assabet, and we're phosphorus ridden. So technically I'm supposed to close off a bunch of storm waterways that go to the river, but 98% of our storm system goes to the Assabet. So we're
I live right back.
yeah, we're in trouble when it comes to that. So it all goes to the river.
Yeah. Makes sense.
I have one last question about solid waste. When I go to like Market Basket and I pay $4 to get a sticker, does the town see all $4 of that, or does the vendor take some percentage from that?
So the company so Market Basket, Russell's, they get a very, very small percentage. I want to say it's 10, 15 cents per sticker that they receive as revenue. And that's about it. Other than that, the stickers are just Town of Maynard and the seller. So wherever you buy, the location seller, and that's about it.
Thank you.
Mhm. A lot of our vendors like to have the trash stickers because it's a draw for other aspects. So if you're going there for trash stickers, you're typically going to buy groceries, or if you're going to Russell's, maybe you're buying something else. But it's a good draw for them. They know that everybody needs trash stickers, so it's not about money per se for them.
All right. Does anyone have any other additional questions about sort of current going on? I have 2 questions about future things. Okay. I did want to touch base. I sent out the water memo briefly before this meeting, so I'm sure that not many people have gotten to see it. But I did want to highlight that is a resource that has been shared with us. And I think that we're all pretty well aware that we can meet the average demands currently, unless the largest one, which is Rockland Ave, goes down.
Yes, but is that the capacity? Did I send you the capacity memo, or did I send you the memo on water rates? I write a lot of memos. I can't remember which one
You sent me the one on the capacity, so not the rates yet. And that was what I was going to circle back on.
Yep. So just so you're aware, just for the finance committee's understanding, if you go under the DPW water and sewer page, you'll already see all of my memos for the upcoming rate change that was already approved. With that, there is a significant amount of material that will all be PDF'd. So you can find all that information very easy right now. That memo for capacity was based off of, I want to say, Jillian, you posed the question in the email, was just more for like future growth. So like I stress in regards to the PowerPoint presentation of solid waste, that memo was only good as the day it was written, meaning those developments were presented at that time, and that's when we ran that analysis. So we will be running another analysis probably in the next month or 2, as some of those developments are no longer looking to do what they anticipate, and some have looked to change their approach. But overall, holistically, like high level, Jillian, yes, we can meet our average day demand operating our equipment at 24/7, which is very, very unwise. So technically we're meeting our average day demand, but we're maximizing our equipment, which is degrading its lifespan. So it is not a great approach. And it is something that we've been doing for about 10, 15 years. If we were to lose our largest treatment plant, yes, that means you would not be able to turn water on. That's what that means. Literally, you wouldn't be able to turn your water on. So when we look at future growth and current capacity, there's multiple ways to look at it. But in high level, just know that when you hear developers or developments talk about units, we have to dive deeper than units. So if someone says, hey, I want to build a 200 unit complex Stratus, I actually need to know the bedroom count, because on average, it's 110 gallons per day per bedroom. And that's the games that sometimes we play with developers. Technically, when I say we, I mean the Department of Public Works and the planning department work diligently for what we like to refer to as sustained growth. So Maynard Crossing, not sustainable. So 115 Main Street, 246 Powder Mill, 42 Summer before that, that's sustainable growth. That's something that we're investing in capacity, and our timeline is being met while developers are also growing. What we're nervous about, or what we cannot support, is these major development changes, things that the state of Massachusetts is jamming down communities' throats outside the 128 belt. They've already jammed it down everybody's throat within the 128 belt. That's why Waltham's no longer a town. So, but that's starting to hit that 128 belt into that 495 area. So if you looked at Massachusetts, kind of does one of these. So everything within that 128, 495 belt starting to see that urban sprawl. And there's issues there. For the town of Maynard, singularly, our issue is 100% our water capacity and our ability to produce enough water to meet the average day demand and peak day demand. We have just recently, we're finalizing what has been a 7-year process for a brand new ground well source called 4A and treatment plant upgrades to incorporate that new well source. And I don't know if any of you go to any meetings, but you'll hear me say this, and I've probably said it over 100 times. That ground well source is strictly the capacity that was required for Maynard Crossing. So they built it, then we had to come in and backfill it. We didn't build that, and now we're saying, hey, we can handle another Maynard Crossing. We technically went backwards. So we're at a point now where we're finalizing that, and it's onboarding. It should be in full operation by spring. We're targeting about 90% completion at this point right now, but the last 10% has to do with chemical treatment processes. And like I say, it's like fine tuning your recipe. So you can bake a cake, and then at the end, it's all the sprinkles, the toppings, and that's the minutia. It takes a little while. So when you're talking about chemical compounds and treatability, there's issues in regards to like onboarding and backfilling our distribution system, which if you're unaware, we have 3 treatment plants. We are not tied into a regional system. We're not tied in anywhere. We have a hard connection to Acton that doesn't work. But we're not on MWA. We're not a water district. We are 100% our own water producing utility. We have 3 treatment plants. And within those 3 treatment plants, we backfill our distribution networks, meaning we pump out of the ground, we treat, and then we push it through the pipes that actually connect to your house, the mains and everything. And they funnel back into our water tanks. And then our water tanks provide gravity back. That's called a blended system. So there is complexities to blending 3 different treatment plants within a system to make sure the water quality all matches. So that's that 10% factor of where we're at. But without going into too much of that detail, Jillian, our next phase is Rockland Avenue, which is we have a 4-phase water capacity improvement master plan within our water utility. Phase 1 is well 4A and the treatment plant, which is almost done, and we'll be moving towards our phase 2 approach, which is new well sources at Rockland and treatment plant upgrades and modifications. And we're starting that process. We have been lucky to receive an earmark from Kate Hogan for $400,000 to start piloting and permitting at Rockland. And we are also in litigation with PFAS manufacturers. So we should see a roughly, hopefully, anywhere between $2 and $4 million payout, which seems like a lot of money, but it's not. It's better than nothing, but unfortunately, to treat PFAS, we're looking at anywhere between $10 and $15 million per treatment plant. But that litigation funding will help us move towards our water capacity plan, and we'll have to talk about treatability as we start to implement that process. We have already designed our treatment plant 4, which is the treatment plant currently under modification to handle a PFAS system, meaning we flanged it and prepared for an extra treatment process there, but we couldn't afford $10-15 million on that project at this time. But as we move forward, Jillian, the conversation of growth is 100% tied to Rockland Ave. Our future growth, what you'll see as residents within the town of Maynard within the next 5 or 10 years, is directly tied to the ability to execute phase 2 Rockland Ave treatment plant upgrades and new well sources. There is currently a well there that was piloted when Rockland was going through its design process. At that time, there was enough well sources to feed the treatment plant, We have since lost a well there over 5 years ago. So we're exploring the last opportunity well, and we also have property there that we're going to explore for expansion of well sources. That treatment plant's designed to produce 1 million gallons a day. It's our largest treatment plant, and it's running at 0.33 million gallons a day.
Okay.
So we're looking to maximize its availability and treatability, which is why it's phase 2. It's actually our quickest turnaround. So we're hoping to capture roughly anywhere between another 0.3 to 0.5 million gallons a day, somewhere in that location around Rockland. That would give us the availability for sustained growth and conversations of redevelopment, such as Stratus, such as what you're seeing in Acton, Powder Mill Place, things of that nature, which bring in significant new growth. They bring in constraints. Don't be fooled by the sheer fact they do bring in new growth, but they also constrain services. So it's a balanced approach when you're talking about new growth and how quickly you want it. But yeah, Rockland Ave, which we're hoping, and we're on task at this point right now, from anywhere between 5 and 6 years. If we can expedite it, we're hoping to move that process in 4 years. But permitting takes a long time with DEP. And also cash flow takes a long time. We have, in 4 years, positioned our water and sewer utilities financially to be the most secured they have been in multiple generations, which allows us, there was financial gaps where we couldn't execute design, where we couldn't even execute permitting, where we had to wait an entire fiscal year before we could even move. And that was the gap that has put us in the position today to not maximize growth. So on my last rate hearing with the board, I explained to the board that in the Department of Public Works realm and large scale infrastructure realms, we work in 5-year blocks. So we design our CIP in 5-year blocks, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. And then when we hit 25, we plan for 50, 75, 100. That's just what we do in our world, because we design infrastructure and facilities that have a life expectancy of that magnitude. But within my time in Maynard, we have executed our first 5-year block, which is phase 1. Within phase 1, we also executed a significant amount of operational increases, resource increases, and have brought our department full circle, which has also resulted in the sheer fact of reducing our average day demand by recapturing water that was lost, unaccounted for. We did that, and we've actually dropped our average day demand, which now allows us to have a conversation for larger sustained growth within that 4 and 5 year window. We have been highly successful with also recapturing revenue without adding a customer. We had meters that weren't reading properly. We had a lot of issues in regards to our revenue stream for large scale commercial. This was all due and tied back to our limited resources, staffing. We had a DEP mandate, and we had a staffing plan that was executed over 5 years, and we're now seeing the results of that, which was a revenue share of last fiscal year of an excess of $250,000 without adding one customer. That's a significant amount of money found through auditing. We've also reduced our average day demand from 0.77 million gallons a day to 0.68. Now that doesn't seem significant, but I will tell you that's a 100-unit development. So that right there, when you're talking about new growth or the allowance, or why you may see in one breath me hesitate to allow for large scale projects, yet we continually are approving 115 Main Street, 246 Powder Mill, and may entertain another smaller situation, is because we're making efficient and effective approaches to our operation, which is allowing for that growth. And when we're talking about the town financially, we need new growth. This town does not stop spending. And there's no slight on that, but there is, in my 4 years, I've never seen a budget cut outside of a minor budget adjustment. And it's not changing. So if anything, we need to secure more revenue. And that comes in the sheer fact of economic growth and redevelopment and the potential of new growth. So our biggest pinch point or our biggest hindrance to allow that is our water capacity, which I believe the select board is working on at the highest level, as is the DPW. It is our main goal, our main objective. Don't get me wrong, Katie, I'm going to pave your road, but it's sadly secondary in regards to our water capacity.
April, I'm expecting you in April, Justin.
It will. We have Chapter 90 funds. But unfortunately, our focus is hyper-focused to this because
yeah, I get it. Yeah.
New growth allows for the conversation to be every department seeing increased funding mechanisms and reinvestment everywhere else. But this is the pinch point holding Maynard back, and we are making strides. We have been very successful over 5 years, and we're hoping the next 5 years will allow us to have conversations for the next 20. And then phase 3 will allow us to have conversations for the next 100. You always want to get to a point as a community that your infrastructure isn't the situation holding back the community's wants and needs. And unfortunately, in Maynard, that is it. In other communities that you see strive or grow, that's because they get to choose to, and their infrastructure isn't holding them back. So if they want to be X, that's the conversations they have, but it's not really a conversation of can we support it. So when you drive around the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and you see highly successful communities growing exponentially, it's because their infrastructure was in place. Maynard has the ability within our geographic location to be something unique. We already are unique, but I will tell you this, if you look at our surrounding abutting towns, they're very small. They do not want growth. They fight it. Milton's not going to be the first one. I wouldn't be surprised if Concord fought them. The new zoning. Why am I drawing a blank on this? The MBTA zoning restrictions. You're going to have communities that don't want growth. Maynard has the luxury of being that micro-urban situation where it's supported. We have a downtown. We want to revitalize that. How do you revitalize that? Well, if you bring in residents, businesses will follow. If you bring in the need and you have a situation, we have a location that allows for that. We just have to enhance our growth. Again, it's the sustainable way, not just open the floodgates and everybody come in and just build whatever you want. It's more of a sustainable growth. It's also not getting in the way of it, which Maynard has a tendency to do over the past 10, 15 years. And I wouldn't say it's Maynard as a whole. It's because of the sheer fact of their infrastructure. And they didn't want to necessarily build it so they can come. We're at that point, though, fiscally, that we need to start to have that conversation, which we are. And we have been for the past few years. And we're definitely in a good situation. We're trending in that situation moving forward. But unfortunately for your water sewer rates, they're going to continue to go up. We've just designed our rate increases to be sustainable as well, so that we're not looking at capturing 50% in a year. That's not sustainable for our residents and our customers either. So yes, we're on track at this point. So thank you, Jillian, for bringing up the timeline. This may have to be adjusted a little bit. So when this went into play, Rockland Ave at the time, where are we? 2023.
This is back from May, I think.
Yep. So we're trending on track for well 4. So in 2023, so we're about a year behind well 4 improvements finalization, which pushes Rockland out. So it should technically say Rockland. So when we update this, it will say Rockland starts in 2024, 2025. And the reason that it ends there is because we don't know how long the permitting will take at that point. That's the piloting process. So until DP gives us an estimated timeline on their permitting process, we can't give you an excess date beyond that, and or borrowing and bonding capacity. I will say Rockland phase 2 will be somewhere in the range of our well 4A 4 improvements, anywhere between $10 and $15 million to capture that, those new well sources and treatment plant upgrades. And that will be over the course of 2024 to roughly 2027, 2028.
So is that something that would need to be bonded?
Absolutely. We don't have that kind of funds. We bond within the water and sewer utilities. Our operating capacity is in the $100,000 range. We have retained earnings that we could squeak out a $200, $300 ask, as you'll see, every couple fiscal years. But we can't handle multi-million-dollar projects outside of bonding. Now, just be aware, we do not rely on general taxation to offset any of those bonds. They are 100% offset by the water and sewer bills. And we have a long-term financial plan. When we have debt fall off, we try to start to build back onto it so that we don't have significant peaks. So a lot of that project timing also has to do with our financial strategy as well.
So Justin, you touched on this already, but so you mentioned Milton, for example. Milton's pushing back. I mean, maybe it's that they don't want growth. They're claiming they don't have the support structure in place to meet the MBTA mandate. So let me ask you, do we have the infrastructure to support the requirements of the new MBTA zoning, state zoning law?
So for the target location that the planning director and the planning board have identified was in collaboration with my office. So it's the old Stratus location meets the MBTA zoning minimal requirements for the town of Maynard. Every town has a different requirement based on their location within the MBTA system and their population, jobs, etc. So do we have the infrastructure? That's a very open-ended question. We have the roadway right-of-way infrastructure to handle traffic loads in that location. It was always designed to house thousands and thousands of employees. So that is, we have the infrastructure in regards to rights of way. We have the piping infrastructure, so water mains feeding that location. We have sewer collection system infrastructure, so the collection system of sewer leaving that site. We have a pinch point of our Powder Mill sewer pump station, but that's already a high-risk area currently. Can that be upgraded? Absolutely. Can that be upgraded for $3 to $5 million? Absolutely. If we saw a developer come in of the magnitude of 400, 500 units, we would look to secure a MassWorks grant for roughly $3 to $5 million for that sewer upgrade. That would solve that issue. So from that infrastructure, we're good. From a water capacity infrastructure, we are not able to handle 400 or 500 units of multi-bedroom mixed use. Now, this goes into a theoretical conversation. Just because the zoning would change to allow for by right does not mean that the utility has to support it for water and sewer. So technically, it removes a hurdle for a developer, and it puts the defensive onus on me, denying them as the water and sewer director within our water and sewer regulations. So our local regulations, so the zoning does not guarantee you public utilities. It only guarantees you the availability of building X within that parcel. So I go back, and I don't know how much, I know Peter and Jillian been around for a while with me now. My previous position was in the city of Marlborough for over 15 years. We saw, I handled significant growth patterns, large scale urban environments. But there's an adjacent community, if you're unaware, it's called Berlin, and it's right by the Solomon Pond Mall, if you've traveled to the mall before. Within Berlin, that rotary that's connected close to 290 at one point used to just be a masonry supply chain and farms. Spooky World used to be over there, for any of you that were local. Berlin is a community that does not want growth. They are a farm town, and they want to be a farm town. They were threatened with a 40B, and for them, they allowed the 40B to go at the edge of town, which was literally, you could practically say it's Marlborough, but it's Berlin. They allowed that large scale apartment complex that you see now, and they also see a hotel. Berlin does not operate a public utility, meaning water and sewer. Marlborough denied the availability of our extension of water and sewer to those developers. So yes, they moved forward with their 40B, but they had to tap their own water systems. They had to treat their own water systems. They have a water tank for pressurization, and they have their own wastewater treatment facility that goes into a septic system. If a developer were to place something X in a zoned environment and we can't handle it from a public utility and we denied them, they could potentially go in that direction. So I think that's the best way to understand what the MBTA zoning is. So there's pros and cons. The con would be losing grant opportunities. Maynard relies heavily on grant opportunities. In 4 years, I've secured $8 million worth of grants. Half of our infrastructure improvement is grants, if not 3/4. So that's a hard conversation to have. We also have the luxury of a corridor that was already previously designed to handle these kind of loads. It's just our water capacity. When we're talking about meeting with developers, the first conversation in pre-application is they get an introduction to me and they get an introduction to our water capacity issues. And then we provide a recommendation. I ask for their loads immediately. Typically, that's not done until they start a design development. I ask for it at schematic design day one, just so that we don't waste their time and they don't waste our time, and that our capacity model and memo stays as up to date for our stakeholders as possible. I am currently supporting the planning board's movement of this passage because I'm also seeing what is happening to Milton. The state is not taking it kindly. I could give you my personal opinion. I will tell you it's not right to force policy in this manner, but it's not something that's in my control. I also don't want Maynard to lose out on opportunity for something that we can still manage. I think the larger conversation here is for all of you to talk to your local legislation about forced policy and its repercussions on your finances, because it's not coming with any revenue. It's not coming with anything outside of the sheer fact of a penalty if we don't adopt it. There's not, hey, the second you adopt it, here's an extra $10 million. There's zero funding mechanism coming with this. So is it going to be contentious?
And I did want to just point out, if you all are looking for any of these memos, you can find them here in the water and sewer area.
Yep. And then honestly, off to the left, you'll see a whole bunch of other things too. So you'll see our PFAS tracking. You'll see our lead service line identification. These are all policies as well that come with very minimum resources when it comes to funding. So, but in essence, currently our capacity, we have some control, Kevin. Okay. And that control really falls on our shoulders locally. And the board has made it very, very known. There was a large conversation after our rate hearing about this particular article and the board's hesitation to adopt it. But just reminding the board of our rules and regulations, and our rules and regulations for our water and sewer are very strict. We adopted that on purpose for control mechanism. And that, sadly, that's where we'll fall. I'm sure I'll get beat up for it, but I got big shoulders. So we'll make sure that everything gets done appropriately and our customers have sustainable utilities moving forward. I will say the current owner of that parcel has been somewhat amenable to the conversations. It is not, we have only been threatened by 40B once, but the developer knew that they can threaten it all they want, but we don't have to guarantee public drinking water or public sewer. And they didn't want to entertain the sheer fact of having their own well source treatment plants and wastewater treatment plants. Honestly, you can even look to your neighbor. So technically Sudbury, all their downtown redevelopment, that Whole Foods, they're on their own sewer station and septic. Sudbury does not have a wastewater treatment facility. So you can have growth. They're just not guaranteed to have utilities. But as I told the board, there's opportunity here. So let's put our business model cap back on. In order for us to sustain all 4 phases of our water capacity, we need customers. 4,300 customers can't keep taking on this burden of rate increases anywhere between 5 and 10% a year. So if anything, sustainable growth will allow for us to take on customers, scales of economy, should hopefully curb that as we develop and get back into a nice cyclical business model cycle. We should be able to take on customers, invest, take on customers, invest, take on customers, invest. And I'm only telling you that from the utility, but as we take on those customers, they have new growth, general fund. They have service requirements, which could be operating budgets over here that could see a downsize. But as Peter talked about at the beginning, apparently we need children in our school system.
Mhm.
So like, hey, we need apartment complexes. So if that's a conversation piece, these are all that sustainable growth pattern. That's what we're focused on.
I'll also point out that you probably have fixed costs in your operations that could be potentially spread out across more customers were we to bring them on.
Absolutely. We're a siloed utility. We have 3 treatment plants. That's a poor design. 3 treatment plants for 4,300 customers. So we're talking about 3 plants using electricity, using propane offsets. They're running at half capacities. This is a very inefficient system. You can't change the system overnight. This is a 100-year system, but we can look towards maximization. And that's what we're trying to capture here. So if you notice, phase 1 was 1 treatment plant well maximization without going to a point of overexpansion. Phase 2 is our newest treatment plant. Phase 3, the conversation of phase 3 is MWA, which is a buying commodity, which removes the potential for a 3rd treatment plant. And then you have 2 treatment plants you're operating and you're blending a commodity. And then maybe over time, as your next treatment plant ages out, you do another financial analysis. And if the commodity is appropriate, you buy more commodity and you disposition another treatment plant. And that's a conversation that, we won't see. I'll probably be retired by that time, but the plan can be set. And that's where a lot of the communities are pushing back with them, the MBTA zoning. We're not pushing back, but if the state wants to solve one issue, they're sadly being siloed when they have another issue they can resolve, which is water capacity across the entire belt. We are not the only community that is dealing with this outside the 128 belt. And the Massachusetts Water Resource Authority is throwing away 21 million gallons a day down the drain. And this is literally a situation where state, yes, we have a housing crisis. Okay, yeah, you did really good with your economic development. We have a great, great business model. Now we need to house all of our workers. I would be in full support of saying, hey, let's open up zoning if we had a pipe feeding us. There wouldn't even be a conversation. We'd probably see another 5,000 residents and we'd all be sitting much happier with a spread out taxation and a spread out water and sewer bill and a spread out solid waste and recycling bill. But the state's failing to solve the problem. They're only isolating on the policy approach of housing. So I will say there's a lot of communities in my position. Kate Hogan's well aware, Jamie, we're all pushing against this a little bit, but we're not pushing back. We're pushing for bigger conversations, solving the overall problem, not an isolated issue.
I think I've said this before in prior meetings, but I have of the opinion that we should leverage 41B to argue for MWRA, to argue for, these infrastructure grants that I mean, I would tell, you're probably already doing this, but I would tell Jamie Eldridge, Kate Hogan straight up, yeah, we're accepting development, but we can't get them on our public utility because we are stretched thin.
And they know that 100%. So they push larger conversations. Unfortunately, again, MWRA was designed for Boston, was designed for 100, 150, 200-year growth, but that sprawl is going outside of Boston. And unfortunately, they didn't plan for the sprawl in advance. Now they're reacting to it. And they're only centrally focused on housing because there's a housing crisis. They'll hopefully hear it enough from all of us, and they'll start to move that infrastructure bill, and they'll start to resolve that issue. It may start with communities that are attached to the MBTA zoning. We're the ones pushing back with the utility issues. We're the ones pushing back with the infrastructure constraints. So I think it's starting there, and it's going to eventually come to a boil. I actually am very happy that Milton's going through this process, not Maynard. I'm very happy that Milton's going through this process. They have big pockets. They need to start to bring these policies to court. That's part of the conversation piece here. Until you have a little pushback, you think you're doing the right thing. The governor's office's policy thinks they're doing the right thing until people start pushing back a little bit with alternative views. Oh, did you think of X? Did you look at this? Well, you were implementing that. And sometimes court cases bring that out.
So let me ask you, in your view, because I know we can accommodate and we can be in legal compliance with 41B, albeit we might have to deny public utilities to new development. Would it be helpful for us as a finance committee to draft a letter to our state legislature saying that, look, we could be in compliance, but we're denying utilities and we're bumping up against physical restrictions. Like we can't invite people in only for them to go thirsty because we can't give them enough water.
Kevin, I encourage every stakeholder and every board to have discussions on the repercussions of policy and statute that affects your day-to-day lives and what you do in your volunteer roles. You know, you are the ones who care enough to show up to a meeting without being paid to do this work. It is affecting you. Your letters hold more than you think. Is there going to be a response? Probably not. But just assuming that doing nothing is going to solve the problem is not the right way either. I always encourage everybody to reach out. You know, the part of the reason that we have Kate and Jamie show up to those tri-board meetings is so that they can hear maintenance issues. I will tell you, Kate is fully understanding. I talk to Kate quite often. We try to solve a significant amount of issues because the towns she represents all go through very similar situations that Maynard's.
She's such a direct neighbor too. Like she's on the border of Maynard and Stowe. It's so close.
Yeah. But I mean, Stowe's going through PFAS issues. Their PFAS is singular well sources versus ours, which is a water utility. Hudson goes through capacity PFAS issues. She is well aware of all of our issues, and it's actually something that we try to regionalize and have a conversation with. And I will say that we make strides. It's hard to quantify, but I will tell you we do. We've been awarded a lot of earmarks to at least move our water process forward. The issue is the state's not going to give us $100 million to build a new treatment plant for 4,300 customers. It's just not prudent for them. $400,000 is a lot of money before we receive zero. If we can at least move it forward, like I said, phase 2, Rockland Ave, somewhere in the $10, $15 million range, allows us to have not long-term, but short-term development growth opportunities. And with that, hopefully helps resolve some of the scales of economy, which then can attack PFAS when that changes, which is a large upfront cost, and eventually can invest in more opportunity capacity and again drive zoning change, which drives density, which drives new growth. We're heading in the right direction.
I think we've been having a really robust discussion. I do want to do a time check here and not keep Justin too long tonight. So I wanted to sort of reach out to the community.
Blackboard.
I know. I don't want you to have another, right after the daylight savings time change. That would be pretty rough. So, I want to be mindful of that too. We also have a couple other items here. We only have 3 more meetings now, actually, unless we make a special meeting before we have to send Greg our written recommendations for all these articles too. So I did want to touch on some of the other articles tonight too, because there seems to be quite a few on the ATM agenda this year. But I did want to circle back if there's any pressing questions. I did just want to throw it out there, and I know this might be sort of like a bomb to end on, but there is also the garage that is, I think, in the capital planning. It seems to be estimated around like about 23 million right now. That is something that would also be required at some point in the future. I'm not sure, Justin, if that's exactly been in that priority list. I know the capital planning committee has sort of a list every year. They recommend X, Y, Z.
Yeah. So it's been documented for over 10 years for the DPW garage to receive a significant amount of capital improvements. Unfortunately, over the last 10, 15 years, they've received none. We've had to close down one of the facilities, which is a 1900. That's actually a little earlier than that, but we can't find the dates on it. 1900 pump house, which was housing the water department. It's currently condemned right now, and it's off limits for liability insurance issues. We were lucky to receive ARPA award to conduct a DPW feasibility study, which is what we're moving towards right now. $200,000. Thank you, Kate. And within that study, as you're aware, we just recently conducted a feasibility study for the Green Meadows School. It's not as cumbersome as that. It's a facilities feasibility study. We will explore the current facilities, current situation in regards to all of its aspects, such as structure, electrical, mechanical, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Also, its functionality. We'll also explore the opportunity for modifications on site, or we're also going to explore separate locations for a new facility. If you're unaware of that site's facility, we're literally on the river. We're in a flood zone. We have the only diesel and gasoline tank that services all public safety, actually services the entire community when you're talking about your services, and it's underground in a flood zone. So there is a significant amount of issues with that site reusing it for a DPW garage. So we're also exploring alternative locations, one of them being private property and one of them being public property. The feasibility study will ultimately end up with a analytical approach towards next step, which would most likely be schematic design. Or if it's a situation where it's private property, it's a conversation of eminent domain or taking, which is, not uncommon when you're talking about a public facility and its change in location. Right now, honestly, Jillian, the estimated costs are what the current market is for a community of our size and a service department of our magnitude. So if you're unaware, you hear me say that Maynard is a small town, but we provide every single public works service that a large scale municipality would. There's not one service we don't provide that a municipality wouldn't. Actually, I could even argue that we provide more services because we operate a golf course, where most municipalities don't even do that. So with that, we have significant constraints that have to be explored. But yeah, that's been in the list, Jillian, for years. The issue is it's been in there for multiple different capital requests. Now it's a singular approach.
Okay. And do you know how long that study is going to take? Like when we might be able to expect?
Yeah, less than a year.
More information from it. Less than a year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is far quicker than a MSBA/educational study. We don't have to look at student population, things of that nature. Our operation is easily predictable model. We're looking at more of like a site. It's really a site review, like a site plan more than anything. It's not looking at an operational model. It's really looking at what our projected growth pattern is for a town, but we're not really growing when you're talking about public rights of way. We're not building any more roads. If anything, you heard me say we're going to go vertical, we're not going horizontal. There's not really an infrastructure expansion. If anything, it's an infrastructure replacement. So our operation isn't going to grow. It's more of making sure that our operation meets the services of today and the services of tomorrow, with a facility that's not at high risk, that meets public safety aspects. Our facility services all the public safety aspects of the town. So.
Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was all the questions I had tonight.
Were there any other warrant articles that Justin could comment on? I know there was one about changing the wording so that any additions to a house, any additions currently, it has to be approved if it's in the water zone, and they want to change it to only being in zone 1. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, that's that's for the planning board, but just be aware that so it's a wellhead protection zone. Our wellhead protection zones are mandated by DEP. They're defined by DEP and they're defined by the sheer fact. That's part of that. When you hear me say permitting and piloting of new well sources, ground wells are researched across borders, across parcel lines. It's hydrology. You're talking about aquifers. So there is a large environmental study that goes into the sheer fact of pulling groundwater out of the ground and using it as a public utility. And those zones, if you ever go on our GIS, you can find there's an overlay of our zone 2 protection areas and our zone 1 wellhead protection areas. It's really defining or meeting Mass General Law. So this is really capturing Mass General Law or upsizing it. But that's a conversation with the planning department. But for us, we have a significant amount of development already in our zone 2. This is one of the issues we have with treatability is we have a very, very dense community sitting right on top of our aquifers.
So I mean, I realize this is mostly a planning board issue, but you don't have any particular opinion about them no longer having oversight on zone 2?
No, because it's mandated by DEP.
Okay. Yeah, my understanding is that this is just saying that a special permit is needed when adjacent to a water supply, when you want to build something.
So that just puts on restrictive approaches that they have to go through planning board.
My understanding from reading it was that they were like reducing the requirements. Like currently it's anything in the water supply protection district, and they're saying that the change would make it so it's only zone 1 of the water supply protection district. Is that not?
Zone 2 takes up probably about 50% of our community.
My understanding from what Greg said was that it was always meant to be just zone 1, and that it was a somewhat, unclear bylaw, and that this is just clarifying the bylaw. It's not really changing what we meant by the bylaw.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that part. I'm a little lost here in all my screens, so I'm going to stop sharing. Yeah, I mean, if there's specific questions, I can send an email to the planning board. They did come and talk to us on the 26th of February. And this was one of the articles we did talk about, so. But we had not seen the draft of the article at that time. So if there's lingering questions, I'm happy to pass them along. Okay. Are there any more questions though for Justin? Because I do want to be respectful of his time, and he's been here for 2 hours, so.
I'm all
right.
set. Thank you, Justin, for answering our questions in detail. And
Yeah, thank
Of
you.
course, if you guys have follow-up questions, if there's follow-up questions, just email Jillian. Jillian, you can email me. I'll try to get hopefully you'll get the draft articles tomorrow. Again, they're all pretty cyclical draft. There's nothing crazy this year at least from DPW.
Great. Thank you
Have a
so
nice
much.
night.
Thank you. Night.
All right, thanks, Justin.
All right. Okay, so I think, oh shoot, I think we can jump back to our agenda here. So our next item is just talking about the town meeting, and some of the draft articles. So I forwarded those to everyone, the ones that I have so far. And I also put them, this is board docs. So I also put all the ones that I have here on board docs. And this is a outline of all the different articles from my understanding and what department is going to be responsible for sort of writing the sponsor comments or, you know, sponsoring the article. So I don't have all of them yet, but we have all the way from A to Z. So there are a lot of articles. And as I said before, we have until April 9th, which is 2 more meetings, to talk about these, to vote on them, and to write all of our comments or recommendations. So sort of, you know, the couple sentences under the FinCom recommends or does not recommend and why. So I could use some help. So usually what we would do is people would have certain interests in certain articles, and you know, we would sort of split them out. So not one person wouldn't have to write the recommendation for all the articles.
I'd be happy to work on, you know, a bunch of those. I think having seen like how it like worked for a special town meeting, I think I like understand what it's supposed to look like. Yeah, like once we vote, I feel comfortable doing like a write up for, you know, if other people want to like to write different sections and split it up. Great, but yeah, just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Jillian, were you thinking people would draft it and then we would talk about it, or we talk and then someone draft it?
So I think what we have done in the past is that people sort of draft them based on the feeling of the committee. A lot of these are going to be straightforward. So they're going to be, what do you call it? Routine.
Boilerplate.
So a lot of these are routine. Yeah. So we might even be able to just use what we had written in the past after we sort of look at the actual articles themselves. But, you know, like we always get transfers for ambulance receipts. We always get, you know, certified free cash appropriations. Like there might be specific questions about what it gets appropriated for or some other things. But a lot of these articles are ones that we see sort of every year, you know, obsolete material. I was sort of curious because the debt exclusion is still on this list. And this is the list I got from Greg last week. My understanding is that article is not going to be on this docket. So there might be some shifting or changing of these, which is also highlighted in the fact that they're still letters and not numbers yet. So once it gets closer, these letters turn into numbers. I think, right? Article 1, 2, 3, 4.
So do we want to divvy up articles tonight to work on?
I think it would be good if we have at least, it seems like if I can math right, which doesn't always happen, if we get like 3 or so articles per person, I think that'll divide it almost evenly. Between 7 people. Is that math?
Yeah.
So if you want, it could be helpful to sort of go through these. I might bring them up in a different thing I can actually write on. So I can stop sharing. Or I'll just share it here and I think I can write it off screen. But are there articles that people are sort of passionate about?
So I do have a list.
Okay.
And you know, this is just, you know, what I feel passionate about. I do think Article E needs to have a note about the use of one-time funds to support some operational costs, particularly on the school. They're running a deficit on their activity. I believe it's their activity fees funds to support operations, so they do not have to do drastic service cuts this year. But I do think we need to include a note on Article E explaining to town meeting voters that this is setting us up for possibly a surprise, possibly a either a big increase in taxes or a big cut in services next year. So they should be aware
Okay.
of the long-term implications at Article E.
All right.
If we scroll down, the other thing I think we need a note for is I feel, I think we need to talk about the stabilization fund. I think there's, I have some thought. I am not 100% on board with that yet. But I'm not the Assabet stabilization fund. Article R.
Assabet. Okay. So I'm like, which one are we talking about? All right,
Article
Yep.
R. Our establishment of Assabet Valley Regional Vocational Stabilization Fund. That one I have, I'm not 100% on board with that yet.
Okay.
And
mhm.
and the rooster law. I
The
have
rooster
some,
one.
yeah,
Which one is that?
It's O.
Oh, okay.
that one, I'm not 100% on board with, I
Okay.
so those are the ones that I have some controversy. I think there's some controversy, ambivalence about that I think I need, I want to work through, but I do have some possible objections to those or possible caveats, I should say, on the budget.
Are there any of these that are in a finished form that we could vote on tonight?
I think we have to wait for the
So
final list before we start voting in case they decide to do like a last minute. I'd be very surprised if any of these get pulled, but I think we should, not vote on something prematurely until it's actually official.
So we have in the past when there's still letters, and not necessarily numbers. So, the only issue is that I think on the agenda I put that we were discussing. I don't think I explicitly used the word vote. And I don't know if that's a problem.
I think you have to indicate in the agenda whether a vote is possible or not. So you could say possible vote, but if you didn't do that, then we may.
Do you know if that matters?
Yeah. I was going back to my days. I remember the school committee does a whole code system on each item in the agenda. So.
Yeah, I'm not that sophisticated. I'll put that from we to I. But yeah, so okay. I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna share a spreadsheet instead where we can actually edit live. So
And I'm taking notes if it helps, Jillian.
okay. Let's see. But yeah, so I think right now it would be helpful if people want to volunteer for this, that you can sort of identify if there's anything that we're missing that we can get in place for our next. But it sounds like, is this too small?
In Texas. Yeah, in your car.
All right. So it sounds like, Kevin, you're interested in E, O, and R.
I mean, the general budget one, I think, is that's the biggest one, and I think should be more of a group effort.
Yeah.
And,
I agree.
Potentially, we don't even include it because we're still, I mean, that's the biggest article, and on the one most likely that we may or may not have ready. So just,
Yep, we just got the certified free cash appropriation, so I just forwarded that shortly before this meeting. So, so to back things
Well,
up, at the next meeting, I invited Assabet to come. So that will be one of the major topics, and then the other topic will be this, the ATM articles.
So is the idea that these will be written up like before the next meeting, or we'll write it after
No.
we start voting on it? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to start writing, in the past, I've done some like, this is yes and this is no, but I feel like having the discussion as a group really helps make the writing part easier. So like if you take notes while we're talking, then it pretty much writes itself. But, and if we're not going to assign them all tonight, we can, you know, talk about them next time. But I can also look at the ones we've written in the past and sort of pull, like for some of these ones that are sort of come up often, what has been written in the past, and sort of make a draft document that people can have on hand just to see what it looks like. I think you've been through a couple cycles now, so I'm sure that you're getting the hang of everything too. So
I'd be happy to do the DPW ones because we got a lot of information on those tonight. There was like K, and
KL,
an L, and is that
the golf
MSBA?
course, S.
The golf course, yep, the golf course is S.
So, but then there's the retained earning ones too, the TNU. There's a lot of articles.
But I
A
can
lot
do,
of
I
them
can
are
just look
routine.
at those. They're probably not, those probably aren't very difficult. So Jill is gonna do,
I can do the zoning bylaw ones or planning board ones.
yeah, and W. Khadijah,
sorry,
can she do
Jillian.
Z?
Yeah, I can do Z.
Yeah,
I can do the zone, one of the zoning or two of the zoning, Jill, if you have too much to do. So,
Yeah, that might be helpful because I'll pull up all of the stuff we've done on the past articles.
yeah, like W
Okay.
and X.
Yeah, if you want,
Sure.
do you want me to do the two ones about the guns, the V and the X, and then I don't know
Okay.
if it matters.
Yeah, and I can do MBTA communities if I find something written well enough.
Okay.
What
I
was
took
it?
some pretty
What
copious
can I
notes.
do?
We got, I think this is canceled. I think this is not happening.
Right.
The public shade tree one, sounds like Nathan, you read that one pretty thoroughly. So is that an accurate assessment?
Sure. Yep. Happy to write that one up.
Okay. Yeah, so then we sort of have, I'm actually not sure what this article is, MSBA reimbursement payments. Is that a routine one, Peter?
No,
That's for Green
Um,
Meadow, isn't it?
I think
Well,
have to do with the
Oh.
school.
Yeah.
That
that's the state is giving us their share, you know, like 50% of what was the cost of the feasibility study.
I can do
And
that
when we
one.
I read it wrong. Okay.
When we voted to fund the feasibility study, we took half of the cost out of the general stabilization account with the intention we put it back in there when we got the money back from the state. I know there's been some discussion of repurposing that to capital stabilization, or I don't know, but if there's an article to put it into general stabilization, I guess that's the decision.
Yeah, there's no sponsor there either, so this list might not be finalized. This was the most up-to-date one I got on Thursday or Friday last week. So
I'm sorry, Jillian, did you send the list around also? I'm not finding it in my email.
I think I sent it around with all of the articles themselves, the copies of them, I think. But if I didn't, I might have made a mistake. But I can definitely send this list, Excel list around.
Sure, yeah. I'm sorry, I don't see, I see a bunch of articles, but no list.
It's not on the body.
Oh,
of the
I
email.
see, the list is in the email. I'm sorry, I didn't go down and look at the email. Okay. That's fine. And then the ones you sent, I guess, on Wednesday, March 6th, that's all of them that exist. So
That's
anything
all.
like,
That's all I have. Yep.
okay. So the free cash or the retained earnings ones for water and sewer don't exist yet.
That's correct.
Right. Okay. Just double checking. Thank you.
Yeah, I only have 11 of these articles, which is like a bit less than half, even though they were due a couple weeks ago. So. So I think obsolete equipment is pretty routine. That's like probably a copy paste. The free cash transfer to general stabilization, we might want to look at and just see what they're proposing, which just came in today, I think. I literally sent it before this meeting. So we didn't have a lot of time to look at that yet. So I think most of these other ones are pretty routine, but it could be helpful to have someone double check and see, for the community preservation fund, you might want to see how those are split versus how they've been split in the past.
It looked like there were
I
some
think
specific call outs in the community preservation fund. I'm not sure if that's kind of like if they always have that, but
Yeah.
there's like some specific like historical studies that were being called for.
Yeah, they have a process where they go through an application process and they sort of talk about all of the people requesting the different funds, and then they award certain funds. So this article is their proposal of what they would like to award this year, is my understanding. So yeah, so I mean, if that's something of interest, I can write you down there. It's difficult because a lot of these people sponsoring the articles are people that I go to their meetings for, but I really don't want to write all the articles recommendations.
I mean, I'm happy to write an article. I'm happy to write for like anything just after we've had a vote and discussed about it.
Okay. So would you like to do the community preservation ones, and then that'll be your 3?
Sound good?
Jillian, I could take F and G. I think those are pretty copy paste standard.
Yep. Okay. All right. Peter, you want to do the free cash ones, P and E?
Sure.
Or do you have any feeling about any of them? Doesn't matter.
No, I'll do whatever. Although, yeah, I mean, once we talk about them.
Yeah.
Transfer, wait, what were the ones, P and H?
P is transfer free cash to general stabilization, and then C is certified free cash appropriation for 2024.
I think that's a duplicate. What was the other one? Certified free, sorry, I should find them.
Transfer free cash to general stabilization. Yeah, it might be.
Yeah,
Well, one is transferring it to stabilization and one is appropriating it.
same thing.
Oh, it is.
Usually
Okay.
as part of the appropriation, we'll do, 50,000 to general, 20,000 to OPEB stabilization and something to capital. And then it's, snow and ice and then capital equipment.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think they'd be separate articles, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't, well, no, when we actually see an article.
I know it's a little
Yeah.
scary that we only have 2 meetings left and we're supposed to write all of these by then and vote on them. It's a little ridiculous.
I know, but I also think we talked about this before, but I think there's some potential pushback that I don't know why the heck they have to print the warrant so early. Doesn't seem.
Well, if the articles aren't ready, they certainly won't be printing it early. So.
Right.
All right. So J is routine. A is routine. I don't know. Is B and D? Is B? We messed up something. So this is like we owe money somewhere.
I think that's a placeholder, and I think they put that in as a placeholder every year. Last year there was one. I don't know if there is one this year or not.
Last year was the Verizon one, yeah?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. And then salary administration plan. I think that's pretty routine
That's
too, isn't
routine.
it?
Yep.
So I'll see what we got for the routine ones in the past. So I can send this out. So thanks for jumping in, everybody. That is very helpful and much appreciated. So I will save this. I'll stop sharing. So these are the articles we have currently. I know that it was a little bit late, but are there any questions on those articles? Do you want me to open any of these? These are the, let me show the screen again. These are the ones that I actually have. So the town acceptance is pretty, that's a routine article. Obsolete, that's routine. Oh, these are different lettered than.
Is it worth doing a quick update on the budget? Just out of the, just because it's an article here and out of the budget subcommittee meeting?
Yes.
Okay. As people may recall, and Katie, correct me if I say anything that's really wrong, but there was a deficit. But when Greg presented the town budget in February, he had made assumptions about state aid and one other thing, maybe the ASABIT number. But there was a deficit even in that budget once you put in the new state aid numbers of something about 150,000. Greg has essentially made that up by cutting the health insurance appropriation. And really that number always has a little extra room in it, which then contributes to free cash. It's always one of the biggest contributors to free cash each year. And it gives us a little extra room for unexpected stuff with health insurance. Similar to the schools spending all of their, kind of revolving fund money this year, we're cutting, or Greg is cutting, any extra money in that employee benefits line. And, you know, we should anticipate a lower free cash number because of it. It's also, you may remember from June when we did budget transfers at the end of the year. Often a source for those budget transfers is, you know, room in that health insurance line. We will have less room in that health insurance line for FY25. But that, you know, essentially is how he's making up for the having less state aid than we thought we were going to have. I think that's the basic update out of the budget subcommittee. So.
That sounds right, Peter. And we don't
Okay.
vote on if the school does take from revolving funds. That's them to decide, yeah?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. And I think it's important to note, the employee benefits isn't necessarily cut. I mean, it's still going up, but it's going up by less than what was in his original budget, if I recall correctly.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yep.
All right. So this is what I had from that meeting as updated numbers.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so we're gonna have Assabet come next time. And let's see.
Can I ask a question
All right,
about,
fine.
on the budget that we just did in cutting health, or not cutting, but paring back on health cost to balance? And it looked like in the PowerPoint on the peer comparison that we were very high on fixed costs, mostly from benefits. And was there any discussion on why that seems to be an outlier for Maynard?
As a deliberate strategy, we provide better health insurance benefits than many other towns.
Okay,
Um,
so to,
I won't get the number exactly right, but you know, I think we're like a 75-25, where the town pays 75% of health insurance and
Yeah.
employees pay 25%. And I think other towns are often 50-50.
okay. All right, so
that
that's
is a,
why we're
you know,
relatively high. So that's a strategy
Yes.
to whatever.
for
Yeah,
recruitment.
yeah, because
You
it's
know, we're
like
not
20
competing as much on
20% of our
salaries.
budget. 20% of our budget is,
Is this the chart you're
the-
talking about?
well, our budget is like 50 million and about 10 million's going to that cost, and we're well ahead of our peers and neighbors, well ahead. Anyway, not for this year, but to look at long term.
Yeah, that is also my understanding, that the fixed costs are higher to offset the potential salary differences. I don't know if that's
It's also
an accurate way to
it's also per capita, and you know, if we're like a smaller like town that has like all of like the services like Justin was saying, that might account for why that is so high.
But the peers were
And this is-
similar towns, Nathan. The gray bar is similar sized towns.
This is something that
think we're s-
Jeffrey Swansford made from the select
Yeah.
board.
Yeah,
So
The issue
this
is
is something
if you
that
look
he
at,
requested from DLS.
but actually, this is a perfect one. If you can make that, if people can read the Maynard line there, there aren't a lot of peers to Maynard, and to me, it really is that population density number. That the towns that Department of Local Services lists as peers don't have our, semi-urban aspect. So,
Yeah,
yes, they're
and they also
peers, but
did
I think
a
there's
little
some
bit of,
differences.
yeah, they also did a little bit of magic math, from what I'm understanding, to make sure that the school districts were matched, so they were single districts rather than like conglomerates. So that also is why some of these are labeled as peers, where other ways they might not be as similar. And something I also talked to Jeff about in these comparisons is also considering, my understanding of the system is that we have a lot of people who are in senior positions, like they have been here for a long time, they've been invested in the system, they've given value to the town for many years, which means in like the step system, I think it's called, they also
Yeah.
could potentially be higher up in the step system rather than like a newer teacher or a newer staff member. So that's also something to consider too, is that their cost, like their salaries, might be more mature
Yeah.
compared to some other towns too. So
yeah, and the schools, it looked like we were heavy on admin. But this was really interesting to look at. See, our administration costs were really kind of peaking there.
yeah, and this is something that Jeff is he would be able to explain it best, but this is something he's trying to understand. So between these different towns and benchmarks and, the state average. So
Yeah,
it seemed like in almost all of the comparisons, the benchmarks sort of looked like the state average. In most cases, but not all cases. So but this is something that he was talking about at the budget subcommittee meeting.
So, Peter, you'd passed around a spreadsheet that had like the itemized accounts for all the different departments going back to like FY17. And
Yep.
there were really detailed records for the school from like fiscal year 19 through 22, but the FY23 and 24, it was like all consolidated under a single line item. Is there any reason why we like lost that visibility that you're aware of?
No, it always starts that way, and then the school committee takes the entire appropriation and, essentially tells the town how they want to divide it up. I would argue there's actually not any visibility in the town general operating budget, and even the line items that, there may have been more detail in some years. That's not really what you want to look at, though. We did get a school, equivalent to like the general fund budget last year. And if I haven't shared that, I can do that if I can find it.
Yeah, I think I have to make you a host here too.
Yeah. Now, I don't know, is this a stupid presentation? I don't know that we have the FY24 version of this, but I'll email what I have for the line items that, you know, it really gets into school by school detail. Email. Don't go there. So I don't know if you want to look at that, that'll give you way more detail. I don't have an FY24 one yet. Oh, actually, sorry, I got a better one. Oh, all right. I guess I did put it together, combining the years. It'll be on the second email. Anyway, so you look at that, and that, you know, you can tell a little bit more about what's going on in each school and the various positions.
And did you send it out to Jill to distribute?
No, I replied to everybody's email. I replied to one of Jill's emails with everything on it. My email runs through Norway, so sometimes it takes a while for it to show up.
I see it. It made it to my inbox.
All right, there's two of
Thank
them.
you.
So,
Oop, okay. Oh, yes. Got both.
okay. But actually, Jillian, if you as the chair wanted to make the request to the school committee, I'd love to have that FY24 line by line detail again, and then I'll add it into the multiple year thing.
Yeah, I don't think I got that email yet, so I'm not exactly sure what spreadsheet.
Okay, yeah, when you see it, there's one that comes, you know, with all three of the years separate, 21, 22, and 23. And that would be the kind of thing they should be able to supply for FY24.
All right. I think my email's tired, so maybe it'll come
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that we need to deal with it tonight.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but I'm sure that the town email is just thinking about it. Just making sure you're not spam. You know, you're pretty suspicious.
Oh.
All right. Great. So keep opening the wrong thing here. Yeah, so I think that's great. We sort of touched on the articles. So thanks for going over those and volunteering to talk about those. We flipped into routine agenda, so we've started talking about other agendas from like the budget meeting. So that was really helpful also for the future planning. So thanks for sharing that. Or sorry, the ATM, the article planning for the general fund budget. Are there any other? I'm going to propose that we skip talking about the future planning scenarios unless anyone has made any new ones. I have not personally, so I really don't have anything to present for that category. So unless anyone really feels a pressing need to talk about future planning, I think we got some good future planning discussions in with Justin to learn about some of the upcoming future infrastructure needs tonight. So I think we have talked about that and learned about some of the upcoming needs, and I think that was very helpful. So I think we can cover that topic tonight. But if anyone feels there's anything we missed, let me know. I would propose to maybe start talking about routine agenda. So we didn't get prior minutes, but Katie, you said you'll get those, so we'll have those for next time. And Linda's doing the minutes this time, so thanks for that, both everybody, appreciate it. Are there any other? I'm going to jump to updates from other chairs and other members. I have a couple updates. I did want to share on board docs. I also put it on there too. Oops, hold on. I gotta take meeting back from Peter. Reclaim host. Okay, got it. All right, so updates from chair and members. I did want to share that the select board got a Q&A from the school about the field, the bleachers. So this will not be an article for the ATM, is my understanding, but will be for the special town meeting, the STM, later this year. And this covers a bunch of questions that we were actually asking and talking about in one of our prior meetings when it was still on the ATM article. So it goes over, you know, if you change what the capacity is, how much is the cost, and, you know, reducing it, how much you're going to say. So this answers a lot of the questions that we had. So I think this is a very helpful document. So this is on board docs. I did also email it to you all at some point, but sometimes it's easier just to find on board docs. And it sort of talks about, you know, if we wait to delay it, what will be the cost if we delay it? So it looks like it'll be about $50,000 to delay it. So that'll cover, you know, attendance at additional meetings and some updates to the plans, I guess. So, and my understanding is there is a meeting in the fall. It should be covered. It'll be timed well. You'll have the ballot vote with the general election vote, so we won't have to spend money for another vote just for this topic. It also had some estimates of, you know, attendance at other games and things like that. So this is a pretty helpful document to go over. If anyone had any questions on that, we can, you know, invite them, the school at a future meeting to talk about it when it gets closer to special town meeting, or if there's any, you know, breaking sensational news about that topic. I think that was an update. I also did want to let you know that we do have a ClearGov login now. So if this is something that you would like to play with on your own, let me know. We only have one sign in. So, so if you would like to use this, I can send you that information. And this basically covers the capital planning. So if you click on the capital planning, you can see in ClearGov, this is where they started to put everything so that you can see all of the town's capital requests. You can see them by department. You can see them by year. So this is the capital planning committee looking out the next 5 years. And this was shared by them to me. And you can see it sort of by what type of equipment, if it's a building, if it's water sewer, if it's, you know, other equipment. And when you click on something like, we were talking about the golf course today, it gives you a description saying like, why is this necessary? And then it gives you an idea of, you know, I don't know, for all of these, this isn't always filled out. I think the most important thing is giving an idea of what the total budget is, and then this description. And then if you look at like all requests, these are some of the requests here. So you can read all the requests, like all of them. And then there's also like comments in here too. So. I think scenarios and report builder are something we're not subscribed to as a premium feature. So I'm not aware that this account can access those. But this is a tool that we can now look at. And if you would like to look at it, let me know and I will send you the login information, because I don't think we all have it. I think you pay per account. So this is like the FinCom account.
Does that mean like one person can be logged in at a time, or that technically we shouldn't
I
be
think
all
so.
users? Okay.
I think it's just like a one person at a time kind of deal. But
And Jillian, it looks like you have read-only access, so someone in capital planning is.
correct. You
Okay.
cannot
We
accidentally
can't
delete
mess it
anything.
up,
I was
right,
like,
we can't.
please don't let me have any ability to mess this up, because I
Right.
don't want to do that to you. Yeah, so
Good,
it's read only. So you
Good.
can make a comment, is my understanding, but I don't think you can delete anything, so, or change any numbers, which is great. So I'll stop sharing. So let me know if that's of interest to you. So that gives us an idea of that, and it could be helpful for future planning. I can also pull it up while we're in future meetings if we want to look at future planning. And I did want to let you know that there is potentially going to be one of these other tri-board or joint meetings between the school committee, the select board, the finance committee, and the capital planning committee. People are thinking it might be in June. And the main topic is going to be capital. So like future capital, the DPW garage, the bleachers, the senior center, the water sewer infrastructure, all that kind of stuff. So just to give you a heads up that might be happening in June. And I did also want to let you know on April 1st at 7 p.m. in person and remote, my understanding is the Green Meadow School Building Committee is having a public forum to talk about the status of development for the new school. So, but Katie might know more about that than I do, but those are, I think, the updates for me. Any other pressing updates anyone wanted to mention?
I'll just say I attend the senior center committee. They're working very rapidly, as you said, and so they have a track on just how to fund the thing. They know they can talk a lot, but they want to have some proposals for funding. And they're just, the rough estimates are you need about 5,000 square feet at a roughly $25 a square foot. So that's where they came up with the $100,000 to $125,000 if we lease. They haven't really, there's a possibility of long-term. I think the sense I get is they would like long-term, not a leased building, but a permanent building. They mentioned already an override for next year as one possible way of financing senior center, but
Okay, thank you for sharing. Are there any other updates from anyone else? Oh, all right. I will pull up the agenda for our next meeting, which is the 25th. So our next meeting is going to be on the 25th. I have invited the Assabet Valley Regional Vocational School to talk to us about their budget and that stabilization fund warrant, article discussion, and potentially voting. I also put as the ATM recommendation drafting / voting. I think I'll leave the updates and future scenarios on there, but I don't think we'll have time to talk about them, honestly. Given that the Assabet Valley is a pretty big topic, and depending on how many articles I have for us next time, those two will be pretty big topics. And then the next meeting is April 8th, and our written recommendations are due on the 9th. So it doesn't give us a lot of time to vote on everything and write recommendations. So in the past, we have had some contentious articles where we made recommendations in a later printed pamphlet that didn't make it into the printed warrant. So it was sort of like an insert into the things. So it's preferred that we try not to do that where possible. But I mean, I think this year we're not having a lot of luck getting articles on time. So. And I haven't heard of any citizens petition warrants, which I don't think are due until much later. So they're not due until citizen petitions are due March 21st. So we should potentially hear by the 25th if there were any. But we won't necessarily have a lot of turnaround there. So, and our public hearing is on May 13th. So, it has happened in the past where if we can't get everything together by then, by the time that they're due in written format, that we can also vote on them or on the floor, or say our recommendation reason on the floor too. But I would like to try to get everything written that we can by the 9th of April. To try to make as much as possible into the printed warrant. So I'm just awaiting confirmation from Assabet Valley to make sure that they're actually able to attend. I heard a month back that they could, but I just wanted to confirm before I post this meeting officially. So once it is posted, I will circulate around the Zoom link to everyone.
So sorry, just to confirm, is the idea that at the next meeting we'll vote on all the articles, and then we'll after that we'll each write our recommendations, and then at the following meeting on April 8th we'll review those drafts, vote and vote to approve them and submit them the next day for the deadline?
That is the ideal plan, yes.
Cool.
But it is a lot of articles to vote on in one night, so we might not vote on everything on the 25th. But I'm hoping we can at least discuss it so that the person who volunteered to write the recommendation can sort of write a recommendation based on the temperature of the committee. All right.
And Jillian,
have
if we
any
needed
other-
another meeting, would it be April 1st? That would be between those two, or is there any other time?
Yeah, I think, and unless we meet on not a Monday,
Okay, okay.
which I think
But it
would be
would
pretty
be-
untraditional, but it would be April 1st, and that would be it.
Yeah,
So what we have done in the past is we can meet on the 25th and see how that meeting goes. If we feel that April 1st meeting is necessary, we can decide that as a committee as well. Um, That's why I tried to invite some of the key people to talk to us about the articles before then. So, you know, if, for example, we think there's a big question about like free cash or some appropriation from the general fund, you know, I could invite Greg to come on April 1st or something and talk to us about that. Like, I think it's also important to make sure that we don't have any questions or concerns about the articles themselves too. Because the writing part will be pretty straightforward once we're all aligned on the topic. I'm not as worried about the writing part. I'm more just making sure that we fully dig into the article and we're able to explain it in such a way to the town voters to fulfill our responsibility. So, and I think part of that responsibility is really trying to get it out with the printed warrant, because that gets mailed to everybody's house. So if people have questions or concerns, they can kind of see what we've, you know, the couple sentences we wrote about the article. They might read that maybe more than the article itself, you know, the recommendations that the sponsor and the FinCom writes. All right. That is all that I had on my agenda today. So does anyone have any other topics, or shall we entertain motions?
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right, so Linda has moved and Nathan has second to adjourn at 9:53 p.m. I will take a roll call vote to adjourn. Katie?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes, yes. Excuse me.
Linda?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Nathan?
Yes.
Khadija?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you, everyone. I am also yes. I will make sure to vote. So, so our meeting is now adjourned, and we will see you all on the 25th.